Hi, welcome to Aran Makes Designs, where today I'm going to show you how to make this really simple love bomb using your 22-pin circular knitting machine. Let's get going. To make the little love bomb, you will need a 22-pin circular knitting machine. This one here is the Addi Express Professional by Addi, but you can use any brand of machine that you have. Some Aran worsted weight yarn. This is Caron Simply Soft in white and watermelon, but again, you can use any color or weight of yarn that you want. Some filling of your choice, some little yarn scraps to make the fire on top of the bomb, a little fine-tooth comb. Some people even use dog combs to just brush out and tease out the fibers there. Scissors, darning needle, straight pins, and a crochet hook. This crochet hook is used to create the wick of the bomb, but you don't have to use a crochet hook. You can just braid or plait yourself one of these. So don't worry if you don't have a crochet hook. Before we get going on the machine, I want to show you what we're going to be making. We will be making 2 tubes. The first, this longer one, will be 40 rows in length, and that makes up the ball of the love bomb. And then a smaller one, which is just 5 rows in length, and that's this top part here. I'll put the row counts up so that those of you who are familiar with the machine can pause the video now, get on with making your tubes, and then join me when we're ready to do the construction. For those of you who need to see the work done on the machine, you can just hold on, and I'm going to show you how to do that next. Now, both of the tubes for the love bomb are made in exactly the same way. So I'm going to make the larger of the two tubes, and then I will give you the row counts at the end so you can get on with making the smaller of them. Remember when casting on to put your working yarn behind, underneath the first pin, and then weave your yarn behind and in front of every single pin as you go around. Now, the 22-pin machines have a common little issue when casting on. Lots of people will cast on very loosely because as the tension becomes greater in the first few rows, the yarn can start to snag. I will show you quickly what I do here, but I have a little video that I've made, and I'll link it just here. And if you'd like to watch a further explanation, you can see that video there. And I also put it down into the description. Now I am going to reset my counter. And I am going to knit myself now that I have cast on 40 rows. There we go, it has started to catch. All I do is take my darning needle, pick up the yarn, and lift it over top of that peg that it's catching on. It will do this for the first couple of rows, and then once I get all the way around, once I have finished those rows, it will stop catching it and I'll be able to knit as normal on the machine. And there we go. You don't need to see me do the 40 rows. I will see you around here when we're back and are ready to cast off. And there we go. We have knit our tube of 40 rows. I'm just going to cut myself a generous tail and go around and cast off. I'm just doing a basic cast off, nothing fancy. To do that, I take my yarn out of the yarn feeder, turn my handle until I'm almost all the way back around, but of course it's popping the live stitches off, so I don't want that last stitch to come off. And then I just take my darning needle and I pick up a stitch at a time. I pick up a stitch at a time until I have about 3-4 stitches picked up, and then I go around and I pick up multiple stitches at once. When you're doing this, be careful that your next stitch, the next live stitch, doesn't accidentally pop off the machine. To make sure that doesn't happen, I always like to just hold on to that stitch. And there we go. This is a really quick and fun project. I was imagining people who sell things at markets that this might be something that people would be interested in. Right, there is our first tube, which is 40 rows. And now I'm going to leave you to get on with knitting the second tube, which is really short. It is just 5 rows. And I will meet you back here once you have both tubes off the machine and we're ready to get on with the construction of the love bomb. The construction of the love bomb is very simple. First, we're going to start with the ball part by turning it into itself to form a mini hat. Pull your tails tight. Now, I am not going to worry too much about this top closure here, making sure that it's very, very tightly closed, because this part is going to be covering it. So all I'm going to do is bring my tails together and tie a secure knot. And then I will cut my tails not too short. If you cut them too short, you risk them popping out of your work once you are all finished. And then I'm just going to turn that inside out. And there we go. That is the beginning of constructing the love bomb. And what I like to do, because we get that sort of bunching up around the top, is I just put my fingers inside and press it down. This works really well with the smaller tubes that the 22 pin machine makes, but unfortunately with the larger 46 or 48 pins, it's much harder to smooth out that bunching. And next what I want to do is I want to fill my love bomb. When working with polyfill, I like to tease the filling apart so that it's not all lumpy, and I also think it helps to bulk it up. And then I'm going to press it in firmly. Now, how do we make sure that all of our stitches come out looking lovely? And all I can say is it really takes practice. You don't want to be overfilling so that your stitches become stretched out. I think that looks not very neat, not very tidy. But you also don't want to underfill so that your work looks floppy. So really it just takes practice, just lots of making different things until you get the hang of what you're doing. Now that I have this filled, I'm going to create my drawstring. I'm going to take one of my long tails that I had cut off and put back onto my darning needle there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a drawstring for this bottom part here. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for each stitch that goes around. And the stitches are made up of 2 legs. I will pick up 1 leg from each stitch. So I pick up this stitch, this leg. I skip the next leg, pick up the next one, skip the one after that, pick up the next one, skip that one. And I'm going to make my way all the way around, picking up every other leg. Now, you don't need to watch me do that, but when you get all the way around, don't close it off, because we're going to talk about adding or removing filling, and then also I'm going to show you a little trick that I do to make sure that we get a really tight closure. So I'll see you once you've made your way around. Okay, now that I have made my way around the first time, I'm going to pause and have a look at my ball. If I pull my yarn in, I can see that my stitches are starting to pull a bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of filling out. And this is what you need to do. You need to check your work and see if you are happy with the amount of filling that you have in there. So I'll just pull that again. And I think that, for me, that's looking better. I find it hard when making balls to get the stitches not to pull a little bit, and you might find that too. Right, now we're going to have a look at that drawstring we made. Lots of you will probably know that when you go to pull this tight, it doesn't want to stay closed. And so here's a little trick of what I do. I go back around that drawstring and I start picking up. Of the legs I picked up the first time around, I'm going to pick up every other one of those legs. So I'll come up and pick up that first one, skip the next one, pick up that one. You get it. We're going to go all the way around, picking up every other one of those legs, and this will help to create a much tighter closure. There we go. Now I am meant to skip this next one, but I want it to be right up next to that starting tail, so I'm going to go underneath that. And then I start pulling both tails at the same time. And there we go. It stays nice and closed. So tie yourself a secure knot, and then hide your tails inside your work. I do that by popping my yarn back onto my needle, bringing the tails back in and then out through the other side. And then I just, there we go. Cut those tails and pull them in so that they are hidden inside. And there we have the beginning of our love bomb. The top of the love bomb can be a little bit finicky because anytime you're working with so few rows, becomes quite bunched up. So just pull your ends of your tube so that your stitches become nice and uniform. Right. And then I'm going to pull my tails nice and tight. And I'm just going to create a little ball. And I'm doing that. I just place my thumb inside that space in the tube there and shift the knitting around until it's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to place inside that little space just a small amount. I don't need a lot, just a small amount of filling. There we go. And I'm going to make sure when I did that, that my tails aren't off over on the sides here, that the tails are in that inside of that space. I hope that's clear. I know I'm working with white and that can be a bit challenging to see. What I do now is I'm going to take one of the tails. I know they're ridiculously long, but I do like to use them for sewing with, so I'm going to keep them long for the moment. So I'm going to put one of the tails back onto the darning needle, and I am going to do a mattress stitch. Mattress stitch is my favorite technique for closing work from the outside because it makes a neat, almost invisible join. What I want to do when mattress stitching is to find a column, see if I can bring it up here, a column of stitches that I'm going to work into. This one here. A column is where the stitches are on top of each other. Rows are when they are beside each other. So I'm going to be working into this column here, and then on the other side, I think I'm going to be working into this column of stitches here. Oh, maybe not that one. There we go. To keep your work neat, you want to make sure that you are working into the same column of stitches on both sides. Right, I'm going to bring my darning needle up and out the top, sorry, through the middle of the stitch that's at the top of the column I've chosen to work into. And then I'm going to come over to the other side. Hope this stays in focus. Let's see, can you see that? I hope so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the top stitch of the column that I found on this side, and I am going to find, there we go, the bar. Can you see that there? The bar that falls in between the two legs of the stitch. A stitch is made up of the two legs, and the bar. So in mattress stitching like this, I am looking for the bar. I'm going to pick up that bar, and then I'm going to come back over and make sure that I'm working into the column I want to work into, and I'm going to pick up the bar between the legs of the next stitch down. And then I come back to this side, and I'm going to go to the next stitch down, pick up its bar, and I'm going to go back and forth, making sure I stick to the same column of stitches, and I'm going to pick up the bar between each stitch, working my way back and forth. Now, I do not pull my working yarn until I've come to the end. The reason for that is that when I start to pull my yarn, it will pull the knitting inwards, and it will be very hard to find the stitches that I want to work into. So I'm almost at the bottom. It's only 5 rows. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that working yarn until those stitches come together to create an invisible join. Just pull that tail closed, and then I'll bring these tails and tie myself a secure knot. And then just like we did on the ball of the bomb, I'm going to I'm not going to hide them. And now that I have a nice secure knot, I'm going to take one of my tails and hide it inside, but I'm going to leave the other tail, and I will be using that to sew this top part. Is it the fuse? I don't know. The top part of the bomb onto the ball. We have 2 ends to our ball. There's going to be an end which is much smoother, and this is the end that we had at the very beginning where we just folded our work inside out like a hat. And then this is the end where we created our drawstring. And because we're pulling in so much material there, we get a little bit more bunching. So it is this top end that I am going to cover with this top part. I'm going to call it the fuse because I just really don't know what that's called. If you happen to know what that's called, and I do question why you know the name of the different parts of a bomb, but anyway, if you do know what that's called, would you put that down in the comments for me? So I'm going to take this part here, but I want you to see there is a difference. We're not just going to plop this on and leave it looking like 2 balls attached to each other. We're going to make sure that we are stitching our work in such a way that it looks like this end is coming down with almost a straight bottom edge to it, as opposed to the round edge that this one has. And this is where your straight pins are going to come into play. We are going to be doing another form of mattress stitch, but what I want you to do is to see that you have different rows to this little ball. We have the first row of stitches that go all the way around, right close to the bottom, and then we have another row of stitches above that. And it is this second row of stitches that we are going to be stitching into. And that is what's going to help to pull the work down to create that flatter edge that we have over here. The first thing I want you to do is to take your ball and just pin it to the top. So take your fuse and pin it to the top of the ball. Now, I find, or I always say to pin your work. It is easier to take some pins out than it is to unpick your stitching. So I'm just going to push these really handy pins that I have. They're just my knitting blocking pins. They're just nice and long. And I'll just push them in. However, if you just have like these standard sewing straight pins, this is what I've always used until I realized I can use these. Just use them. Now that that's pushed in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yarn and place it onto my needle. Now, if you didn't keep a nice long tail with your top part for the fuse here, grab yourself another piece of yarn, bring it in from the bottom out here up until you come out the top. What I would like you to do is we are going to take our yarn and we are going to come down to the ball and we are going to pick up the legs. See, hopefully that doesn't go out of focus. We are going to pick up the legs of 2 stitches down here on the ball. So because we have essentially folded this in on itself, we have half the number of stitches shown to the number of stitches on the ball down here. So I'm going to be going around and picking up 2 stitches on the ball to every stitch that I pick up on the fuse. Now, sometimes it's not going to work out that way and I might just have to pick up 1, but roughly that's the rule. So I'm going to come down and make sure that you are going through both layers of knitting. And that gives your work a nice sturdy base. If we go through just the top layer, then it becomes really loose and this starts to stretch out. So I'm going to pick up the legs of 2 stitches on the ball, and I'm going to make sure I pay attention to what row that was in. To keep my work neat, I'm going to make sure that I am picking up the stitches all from the same row all the way around. And then I'm going to come back up. And remember I said, don't work into these stitches right at that bottom. You're going to pick up the legs of that second row of stitches up. So I'm going to pick up the legs of this first stitch here. And then I'm going to come back down and come in right beside where how do I say this? I'm coming in right beside where this yarn is there. Hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to again pick up 2 stitches. And I will come back up to the fuse and pick up the next stitch on that one, come back down and come in and pick up the next 2 stitches on my ball. I can take that pin out and that's right, go up, get the next stitch on the fuse and come down, and I am going to make my way all the way around. Now, I want to say to you is this. If you start going around and it starts to mess up, that's okay. Unpick it and start again. There is no point working your way through something being unhappy with how it's looking. But be easy on yourself. It's okay. I have to unpick my work all the time. And the difference in this mattress stitch that we're doing as opposed to when we closed off the fuse is that I am going to pull my working yarn as I make my way around to pull it nice and tight. So I will leave you to make your way around, picking up every 2 stitches on the ball and 1 stitch up on the fuse and pulling your yarn as you go. And I will see you when you have made your way all the way around. There we go. I'm just working on the last few stitches there. And I am back around to the beginning. There we go. And let's have a look. Doesn't that look neat and tidy? I hope yours looks neat and tidy, but if it doesn't, don't worry about it. Make another one. Remember, the more you make, the more your skills will improve. And I am always working on improving my skills, looking for new ways of doing things. Now that I'm all the way back around, what I want to do is I want to be able to just tie off my tail. So, of course, I should have left the other tail, and then I'd have something to tie to. If you have left your tail and you're just watching what I'm doing, then that's great. Leave that tail and use it for tying off. Otherwise, come in, pick up a little bit of the yarn and create yourself a tight little knot that way. Yes. And then bring your tails back in and hide that. And make sure when you do that you pull firmly enough so that that knot gets pulled inside and you don't have a knot showing on your work. See, we can't all be perfect. I never am. And there we go. We have the base of our love bomb. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to doing the duplicate stitch to make our little heart. And now for creating the heart at the front of our love bomb. It's really easy, and we're going to use duplicate stitch for that. I've cut myself a really generous length of yarn here in hopes that this will be enough to do all of this duplicate stitch. Duplicate stitch is a terrific technique to add details after you have finished your knitting. What I want to do is I want to identify a center column of stitches, and I want to make sure that I'm choosing the column where the stitches, legs of the stitch, come together at a point at the bottom, because of course I want my bottom of my heart to be pointy. In this first column, the center column here, I am going to duplicate 4 stitches. And all that means is I'm just going to go over top of 4 stitches. It's really easy. And take my yarn and come in, and I am about 7 stitches up is where I want to begin my duplicating. So I'll bring my yarn in over on the side here, and I want to count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going to be this stitch here. Don't know if you can see this stitch here that I am going to duplicate. So I want to bring my yarn out and through the center of the stitch that's just below it. So that's 6 stitches up is the one I'm coming out of. Make sure you leave yourself a tail that's long enough to be able to tie off with at the end. So I've come out the stitch below the one I want to duplicate, to copy. And then I'm going to come up and pick up the legs of the stitch that's above the one that I am copying. Don't pull your working yarn too tight. And then I'm going to come right back and in where I had started. And I'm going to bring my needle out through the center of the stitch I'm duplicating. I'm just going to say copying. And then I'm going to come up and through the legs of the stitch above. And you can see exactly what's happening. And I'm going to come down and in where I came out and come up and out the center of that stitch that I just copied. And you can see I am starting to have just white stitches now. And again, I'm going to go through and pick up the legs of the stitch above, come right back in where I came out. And this is going to be, come out the stitch above. Okay, now I've come out there, I'm going to come up and through the legs of the stitch above. And since this is my last stitch in this column, I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to come in again, but instead of coming out above, I'm going to come down here and start the stitches of my next column. Now you will see that these stitches are not right beside each other. This one is 1 stitch above, 1 stitch up. So I'm going to come down and come through the center of the stitch that's right beside the one I made at the bottom. I hope you can see this. I feel like this is becoming a bit convoluted. So I've come out. This would be the stitch that would have been right beside that first one. I'm coming out the center of it, and I am picking up the legs from the stitch above it, just like I've done all the way. And you can see I'm beginning to copy the stitches from the next one up. Come through the middle and out the center of that stitch. And this column has 5 stitches in it. If you are a very visual person and you need to see, and again, I'm just going to pick up the legs from above. I am going to give you, you will see down in the description, a little link to a chart, little pictorial chart of this duplicate stitch heart that you will be able to download. You do need to sign up for my email list with that. Don't worry, I only send out an email about every 2 weeks, just when I have a new video to share with you. I give you links to the new video. I give you any links to be able to download any PDFs that I may have made for those videos. I also give you updates on new patterns to come. As well, I give you, now listen, this row, this column that we're working into, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it has 5 stitches in it. Okay, so I'm just going to be working into the last stitch here. So what was I saying? Basically, I'm not going to spam you. Oh, and occasionally I will give you discounts for my paid patterns to my Etsy shop, Aran Makes Designs. Now that I am, you can find the link to that down in the description below. And I'm just now doing the very last stitch to this column. And again, when I come back in, I'm not going to come out above, I'm going to come back down and into, you can see it's 1 stitch above that way, we go on a diagonal. So I'm going to come down and go into the center of the stitch that would have been right beside that one. Remember, don't pull your yarn too tight. And this is where I'm going to create the next column of stitches. And this column is only going to have 3 stitches in it. Go. I think this is going to be the longest segment in the whole video, how to do the duplicate stitch of the heart. But once you know how to do these things, then you can go ahead and put patterns and designs all over your work without having to do the cutting and tying of tails on the machines, which can be a bit tedious. There we go, I'm into my 3rd stitch, and now instead of coming out at top, I'm going to come all the way across and I'm going to create this next column here. Yes, remember, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to come over and out the center of the stitch that would have been right beside that first one. And I'm going to pick up the legs of the stitch above. And you'll see then I am copying the correct stitch. And remember that this column has 5 stitches in it. So I'm just going to make my way up. Whoops, pulled that a bit tight. It's a bit strange. I'm filming this video right now before Christmas. I made a whole bunch of Christmas patterns and designs, got them out and shared them with everyone. And now I'm having to think ahead. Everything moves so fast. But I want to get a few videos ready and out for just after Christmas. So again, I'm going to be working into 5 stitches, copying 5 stitches. If you make yourself one of these, and you share it on social media, I would absolutely love it if you would tag me, please. Tag Aran Makes Designs. I love seeing what you make. It makes me so happy. I can't stress that enough. It really does make me happy. And it's also nice if you tag me, because then other people can find the patterns and I can benefit from that. So I have done 5 stitches into here. I'm coming back in, and again, I'm going to come out the center of the stitch that would have been right beside this one. I think that's going to be here. It's a bit pulled. Yep, there's that stitch there, and into here. And again, this column, let's tidy those up a bit. This column is only going to have 3 stitches that are copied. There we go. I have also created a large love bomb that can be made on using the 46 or 48 pin machine. And I will link that video at the end of this one. There we go, and that is my last stitch. Doesn't that look good? There's our duplicate stitch heart, and I'm going to come back in, and I'm going to bring my tail out over here to meet up with my starting tail. Remember, don't pull your yarn too tight. And I'm just going to go through and have a look at my stitches and tidy up anyone that looks not so tidy. See a little bit of the pink popping through, but that's okay. There we go. And now I'm just going to tie my tails. Make sure you're not tying them too tightly, because then you risk pulling those stitches so it looks not very neat. And pop my tail back onto the needle and hide them in your work. And then we are going to be ready to move on to making of the wick. Just going to help that through so that I don't distort the stitches of my duplicate stitch. Let's pop that knot inside. Copy this here, pull that there. There we go. And there's the beginning of that love bomb. Our fuse is really simple to make, and please don't come at me if I'm using the wrong crochet terms. I'm not a crocheter, I'm just learning to crochet. But all we're going to make is a little chain of about 5 little stitches. So make yourself a little slip stitch like that, a slip knot, that's what I'm meaning to say. Hook your crochet hook on here. Now, if you're choosing not to do it this way, that's fine. You can plait yourself a couple of rows of yarn to create yourself your little wick there. And then I've got my crochet hook on the inside. I'm just going to catch it and pull that through, just like that. And this is the extent of any kind of crochet tutorials that I will be doing on this channel, because I don't know how to crochet. I am a knitter who picked up the circular knitting machine and love that, but crochet is something I'm learning. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'll do a 5th one. You go ahead and make your wick as long as you want. There. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring that tail through and pull that tight. And then what I have found that makes this wick a little bit stiffer and helps it to stay up on end is I put the tail back onto my darning needle, and then I just weave it in and out of each of those stitches until I'm down at the bottom, and pull that through. Now, of course, if you pull that too tight, you're going to pull your wick all into itself. You know, like this, pull it down. You don't want to do that. You don't want it bunched up, so don't pull it too tight. And that gives us a little bit more of a sturdy wick. And I'm going to put both ends back onto my needle and feed them in through the center of our fuse at the top here. And I will bring them out through the bottom there. Go. And then what I want to do is I'm going to, if I just tie these off down here, that's going to pull out. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring my longer tail in, and I'm going to try and catch some of that yarn on the inside. Maybe someone's going to know something much simpler than this and bring it back out to be beside that tail. So now I have something that's going to anchor my wick at the top. If you happen to know a simpler way of doing that, you can say so in the comments. I'm going to tie the two tails together and as always, put them back on and hide them inside my knitting. And there we have our wick attached to the top. Cut our tails, and all we have left to do is to light our match. Create the flame at the top there. But I can hear my timer going off on my oven, and my jacket potatoes are ready. So I'm going to go off and have some lunch. And here we are at the last stage of making our love bomb, and that is creating the flame. Now this one I've done with just red and orange, but I have here a collection of red and yellow and orange that I got out of my scrap yarn collection that I will put into this. Right, I think that's enough. It doesn't have to be terribly long, but just enough that you are able to pull it through here. Now, I am going to start at the front of my wick and insert my crochet hook in through that top stitch and grab my bundle of yarn. It may, if I'm lucky, come through in one big lot, but I may have to do it a few strands at a time. But let's just see. Excellent, great. And then all I'm going to do now is that I have this loop here. I'm going to take my tails and feed them through the center of that loop. It's a bit finicky. I've had a bit of a longer lunch than I intended. My son's home now for Christmas break, so I went off and we grabbed our Christmas tree out of our barn and brought it inside. There we go. And I'm just going to give that a bit of a trim. Yeah, we brought it inside and set it up. There. Now that we have that on and all the ends are given a nice tight tug, all I'm going to do is go through with the end. I've got this really nice pick at the end, but you can use your darning needle, you could use a straight pin, and just tease apart each strand of the flame there. You don't need to watch me do this. I will see you once we have all of the ends of our yarn teased apart. I'm just on my last strand, and I have found actually it's much easier if I sort of untwist the strand of yarn and then just pull it apart than trying to pick it apart while it's all twisted together. Right, and then this is where I'm going to take my comb and just brush out to make them all blend together. Sorry about the noise. It's not very nice. imagine that's quite harsh on the video. Now you can leave your flame whichever way you like, but I like to go in and give the edges a little bit of a trim up to a center point to make it look like a flame. There we are, and then twist that out, and there we go. We have our love bomb. Now, I really do think that these will be hot items for those of you who sell at markets. What a great gift this would make. Someone could just put it on their desk. It's not just for someone who's in love with someone to give it to them. You could give it to a family member. I think it's just really, really fun and a nice playful take on one of those other bombs that we see going around. There we go. And you can be creative with the different colors of yarn that you use. I know I said in the video that I have a 46, 48 pin, one of these available, but at the time of publishing, I don't have that ready yet. So one day you'll find the link here, but just not at this moment. You might be interested in some of my other 22 pin patterns. These are just a few of them, my little grogu and my positive fruit and vegetables. You can find their tutorials here. I hope you enjoyed that.